Jake Morrison pressed his face against the transport window and stared at the massive space station floating in the darkness. The Zephyrian Academy looked like a giant crystal flower with dozens of glass petals stretching out in all directions. Blue and green lights blinked along its surface, and smaller ships moved around it like busy insects. "First time seeing the Academy?" asked the pilot, a friendly alien with 4 arms and purple skin. "It's something special, isn't it?" Jake nodded, unable to speak. 3 months ago, he had been a regular college student on Earth. Now he was about to study at the most famous school in the galaxy. His acceptance letter still felt like a dream. The transport docked with a soft bump. Jake grabbed his single bag and followed the other passengers through the airlock. The station's artificial gravity felt normal, but the air smelled different. It was clean and sharp, like the air after a thunderstorm. The docking bay was huge and full of aliens. Jake saw tall, thin creatures with silver skin, short fuzzy beings with big eyes, and others that looked like walking trees. They all moved with purpose, talking in dozens of different languages that his translator implant turned into English. "Jake Morrison?" a woman's voice called out. Jake turned and saw a human woman walking toward him. She was about 30 years old with short, brown hair and kind eyes. She wore a simple blue uniform with a badge that read, "Counselor Banks." "I'm Lyra Banks," she said, shaking his hand. "I'll be helping you get settled in." "Great to meet you," Jake said. "I didn't know there were other humans here." "There are. A few of us," Lyra said. "I work as a counselor for human students. Come on, let me show you to your room first." They walked through wide corridors filled with floating holographic signs in different alien languages. Students of all species hurried past carrying books and tablets. Jake noticed some of them staring at him with curious expressions. "Is it normal for humans to have counselors here?" Jake asked. Lyra paused for a moment. "It's just standard procedure. Nothing to worry about." Jake's room was small but comfortable. It had a bed, a desk, and a window that looked out at the stars. His roommate was already there, a short alien with blue fur and large golden eyes. "Hello," the alien said in perfect English. "I am Splash 9 of the Aquarian species. You must be the human student." "Jake Morrison," Jake said, reaching out to shake hands. Splash 9 looked confused, so Jake just waved instead. "I have heard much about humans," Splash 9 said. "You are the species that ended the Terran Wars in only 50 years. Most impressive." "Thanks." "I guess," Jake said. He didn't know much about the Terran Wars, but he didn't want to seem ignorant. After unpacking, Lyra took Jake to meet the headmaster. They walked through more corridors, past classrooms where Jake could see alien students working on strange-looking projects. In one room, students were growing crystals that sang when touched. In another, they were painting with light itself. Headmaster's office was at the top of the station's central tower. The walls were made of clear crystal, giving a perfect view of space in all directions. Behind a curved desk sat the headmaster, a tall creature that looked like it was made of living glass. Its body caught and reflected light in beautiful patterns. "Ah, the human student," the headmaster said. Its voice sounded like wind chimes. "I am Velkoth, headmaster of this academy. Welcome." "Thank you, sir," Jake said. "I'm honored to be here." "Yes, well," Velkoth said, shifting uncomfortably. "We have prepared a special schedule for you. Counselor Banks will accompany you too." "Certain classes? What kind of classes?" Jake asked. "History classes primarily," Velkoth said. "It's just a precaution. Nothing personal." Jake frowned. "A precaution for what?" Velkoth and Lyra exchanged glances. "It's simply academy policy for human students," Velkoth said. "Now, let me show you your class schedule." The next morning, Jake walked to his first class with Lyra beside him. The hallways were full of students heading to their morning lessons. Jake felt excited, but also nervous. He had always loved history, and the chance to learn about galactic history was a dream come true. Remember, Lyra said quietly, just listen and learn. Don't worry about participating too much in discussions. Why not? Jake asked. I love talking about history. Just trust me on this one, Lyra said. The classroom was circular with seats, arranged in rings around a central platform. Jake and Lyra found seats near the back. The other students were already there, a mix of different alien species. Jake recognized Splash 9 from his room, but the others were new to him. There was a tall, thin alien with metal parts built into its body. Its eyes glowed with soft blue light. Another student looked like a walking plant with leaves instead of hair. A third had scales and moved like a snake, even though it had arms and legs. The professor entered the room, and Jake had to stop himself from staring. It was a sectoid, a species he had only seen in pictures. The professor had gray skin, a large head, and forearms. Its eyes were huge and completely black. Good morning, students, the professor said. I am Professor Quindar. Today we begin our study of interstellar conflicts throughout galactic history. Jake leaned forward, interested. This was exactly what he had hoped to learn about. We will start with the Andromedian peace treaties of 2156, Professor Quindar continued. This conflict shows us the proper way to resolve disputes between civilized species. The professor activated a holographic display that showed a star system with several planets. The conflict began when the Andromedian Mining Consortium discovered rare crystals on Kepler 442b. The planet was already claimed by the Centauri Republic, but the mining rights were unclear. Jake watched as the display showed spaceships from both sides arriving at the planet. The ships were beautiful, with smooth curves and bright colors. They looked more like art than weapons. Rather than resort to violence, Professor Quindar sighed, both sides agreed to civilized negotiations. The talks lasted 17 years and involved representatives from 43 different species. Jake raised his eyebrows. 17 years seemed like a long time to argue about mining rights. The negotiations were conducted with great honor, the professor continued. Each side presented their case through formal debates, poetry contests, and artistic displays. No weapons were ever fired. No lives were lost. The display showed elaborate ceremonies and meetings. Aliens in fancy robes gave long speeches while others watched politely. Finally, in 2173, they reached an agreement, Professor Quindar said. The Andromedians would mine the crystals for 6 months each year, while the Centauri Republic would mine for the other 6 months. Both sides would share the profits equally. The class murmured appreciatively. Jake looked around and saw that his classmates seemed impressed by the story. This is the galactic standard for conflict resolution, Professor Quindar said. Patience, honor, and respect for all parties involved. Jake couldn't help himself. He raised his hand. Yes, the human student, Professor Quindar said. I have. A question, Jake said. Why didn't they just disable the orbital defense platforms around the planet and force a quick surrender? It would have saved a lot of time. The classroom went completely silent. Professor Quindar's 4 arms froze in the air. The other students turned to stare at Jake with wide eyes. Excuse me? Professor Quindar said weakly. Well, Jake said, not noticing the shocked expressions around him. If the Centauri Republic really wanted to keep the planet, they could have just knocked out the Andromedian supply ships and waited for them to give up. Or they could have blockaded the jump points. The whole thing would have been over in a few weeks. Splash 9 made a noise like a frightened dolphin. The plant-like student's leaves turned yellow. The metal-enhanced student's eyes flickered rapidly. That is ... we don't. Professor Quindar stammered. Lyra Banks quickly stood up. Perhaps we should discuss alternative conflict resolution methods after class, she said loudly. Jake, let's focus on the historical significance of the peaceful solution. Jake looked confused. I'm just saying it could have been more efficient. Professor Quindar sat down heavily in his chair. His large black eyes stared at Jake like he was looking at a dangerous animal. Class dismissed, the professor whispered as the other students hurried out of the room. Jake turned to Lyra. Did I say something wrong? Jake sat in Lyra Banks' office 2 hours after the disaster in history class. The room was small and comfortable, with soft chairs and warm lighting. Pictures of Earth hung on the walls, showing forests and oceans that made Jake feel homesick. I really don't understand what happened, Jake said for the 3rd time. I just asked a simple question. Lyra leaned back in her chair and studied Jake's face. She had been dreading this conversation, but it was time for the truth. Jake, she said slowly, I need to show you something. But first, I need you to promise. Me, you'll stay calm. Okay, Jake said, though he felt nervous. Lyra activated a holographic display in the center of the room. What I'm about to show you is classified information. The Academy doesn't want most students to know about this. The display flickered to life, showing a young human man sitting in a classroom full of aliens. The man looked about Jake's age, with blonde hair and a friendly smile. This is Ben Carter, Lyra said. He was a human exchange student at the Centauri Institute 3 years ago. Jake watched as the hologram played. Ben was in a history class, listening to a professor describe something called the Siege of Procyon. The alien professor, a creature, with tentacles instead of arms, explained how the siege had lasted 3 years. The defenders showed incredible courage, the professor said in the recording. They held out for 36 months, surviving on emergency rations and recycled water. Ben raised his hand. Professor, why didn't the attackers just cut off the water supply to the city? They could have forced a surrender in 3 days instead of 3 years. In the hologram, the tentacled professor turned pale green and collapsed. Onto the floor. Students screamed and ran from the classroom. Ben sat there looking confused, exactly like Jake had felt an hour ago. The professor had to be hospitalized, Lyra said. Ben was transferred to a different school the next day. The display changed to show a different scene. This time, a young woman with red hair sat in another alien classroom. Lisa Stone, Lyra said. Vegan University, 2 years ago. In this recording, Lisa was learning about the Great Martian Rebellion. The professor, a tall alien with crystal skin, described how the rebellion had lasted 5 years and cost millions of lives on both sides. Both armies fought with great honor, the professor said. They followed all the rules of civilized warfare. Lisa raised her hand. If the goal was to stop the rebellion quickly and save lives, why didn't they just target the leadership compounds first? You could reduce casualties by 90% and end the whole thing in a few weeks. The crystal professor made a sound like breaking glass and fainted. 3 students started crying. The Martian ambassador, who was visiting the class, stood up and walked out without saying a word. Lisa caused a diplomatic incident, Lyra said. The Martian government filed a formal complaint against the university. Jake stared at the display. But she was right, wasn't she? If you take out the leaders first, the rebellion falls apart. That's exactly the problem, Lyra said. The hologram changed again. This time it showed a young man with dark hair drawing diagrams on a tablet. Tony Kim, Lyra said. Rigel Academy, 18 months ago. In the recording, Tony was working on homework about something called the Battle of the Asteroid Belt. while other students wrote essays about the honor and beauty of the space battle. Tony drew detailed tactical maps on his tablet. Jake could see the maps clearly. Tony had marked weak points in the defensive formations, supply line vulnerabilities, and attack patterns that would have ended the battle in hours instead of days. Tony's homework was so effective, Lara said, that 3 different galactic powers classified it as weapons of mass destruction. He was expelled, and his tablet was confiscated by galactic security. But it was just homework, Jake said. Homework that could have been used to actually win battles, Lyra said. Tony had figured out tactics that professional military commanders had never considered. The display showed more scenes. Human students at different schools, all causing panic and confusion with simple observations about military history. Each time, the pattern was the same. A human would suggest an obvious military solution, and the aliens would react with horror. "I don't understand," Jake said. "Why do they get so upset?" Lyra turned off the display and looked directly at Jake. "Because you scare them." "Me? I've never hurt anyone in my life." "Not you personally," Lyra said. "Humans in general. You see, Jake, most alien species approach warfare very differently than humans do." She activated the display again, this time showing peaceful alien worlds. The Zephyrians, like our headmaster, evolved on a planet with unlimited crystal energy. They never had resource wars. The Aquarians, like your roommate, come from an ocean world where territory doesn't matter much. The sectoids evolved as a hive mind, so they never had civil wars. Jake watched scenes of alien worlds where everything looked peaceful and abundant. Most galactic species, Lyra continued, spent thousands of years developing elaborate rules. For warfare, they made fighting into an art form. Battles were supposed to be beautiful, honorable, and fair. Winning quickly was considered rude. "That's crazy," Jake said. "If you're going to fight, you should try to win as fast as possible. That saves lives." "Exactly," Lyra said. "That's what makes humans different." The display changed to show Earth's history. Jake saw images of ancient battles, medieval sieges, and modern wars. Humans fighting with stone weapons, then metal, then guns, then missiles. Humans evolved on a planet that was trying to kill them, Lyra explained. Ice ages, volcanoes, predators, diseases, famines. Survival meant being smart, adaptable, and ruthless when necessary. Jake watched human armies using tactics that seemed obvious to him. Surrounding enemies, cutting off supplies, using terrain advantages, attacking weak points. Other species took hundreds of thousands of years to develop basic military technology, Lyra said. Humans went from bronze weapons to nuclear bombs in just a few thousand years. And the scary part? You didn't stop there. The display showed modern human space forces, ships that looked sleek and dangerous compared to the decorative alien vessels Jake had seen earlier. When humans first made contact with galactic civilization 50 years ago, Lyra said, several species seriously considered destroying Earth before you could become a threat. Jake felt cold. They wanted to kill us? Some did, Lyra said. But humans immediately offered to share technology and work for peace. That's the only reason we're here now. So why am I at this academy? Because humans are still scary, Lyra said. Even peaceful humans like you. You look at a historical battle and immediately see how to make it more efficient. It terrifies aliens who spent centuries making warfare less efficient on purpose. Jake thought about his question in class. I really could have ended that Andromedian conflict in a few weeks, couldn't I? Probably a few days, Lyra said. And that's what scares them. The display showed classified files from various alien governments. Jake could see his own name on some of them, along with dozens of other human students. Every human student is monitored, Lyra said. Not because you're dangerous, but because you think differently. Your tactical suggestions could actually be used by real militaries. Is that why you're here? To spy on me? I'm here to help you understand why your perfectly normal human thinking terrifies everyone else, Lyra said. And to make sure you don't accidentally cause a galactic panic. Jake looked at the pictures of Earth on the walls. Do you think they're right to be scared? Lyra was quiet for a moment. Jake, if humans ever decided to abandon diplomacy and just take over the galaxy, we probably could. Your species has a natural gift for warfare that other species can barely comprehend. But we don't want to take over anything. I know that. You know that. But they don't know that, Lyra said. Every time a human student casually solves a military problem that stumped alien generals for decades, it reminds them how dangerous humans could be. Jake stood up and walked to the window. Outside, he could see alien students walking peacefully through the station's corridors. They looked so innocent and trusting. What am I supposed to do? He asked. Pretend to be stupid? No, Lyra said. Learn to understand their perspective. They value patience, honor, and beautiful solutions over efficient ones. Their way isn't wrong, it's just different. And if I can't learn to think like them? Lyra smiled sadly. Then you'll join the list of human students who got expelled for being too human. Jake turned back to face her. How many humans have been expelled? 47. In the last 5 years, Lyra said. You're number 48 to try. Jake felt the weight of that number. 47 humans had failed to fit in. 47 bright students had been sent home because their natural thinking was too frightening for their alien classmates. What? Makes you think I'll be different? Jake asked. Because you're the first one who asked me to explain instead of arguing that you were right, Lyra said. That gives me hope. Jake sat back down, his mind spinning with everything he had learned. So what happens now? Now we try to get you through the rest of the semester without causing another diplomatic incident, Lyra said. Think you can manage that? Jake looked at the holographic files still floating in the air, showing all the human students who had failed before him. I can try. That's all I can ask for, Lyra said. But Jake? Yeah? Jake walked into his next history class 3 days later, determined to be the perfect student. He had spent hours thinking about what Lyra had told him. He understood now that his natural way of thinking scared the other students and professors. He was going to be different this time. Lyra sat beside him, her notebook ready. She had given him a list of safe responses for class discussions. Things like, that's very interesting, and I can see the honor in that approach, and what a beautiful solution. Jake had practiced them in his room until they sounded natural. The classroom was more crowded today. Word had apparently spread about the human student who had caused Professor Quindar to dismiss class early. Jake noticed several students staring at him and whispering to their friends. He tried to ignore them and focus on being a good student. Professor Quindar entered the room and paused when he saw Jake. The sectoid's large black eyes seemed even bigger than usual. He cleared his throat and walked to the center of the room. Today, we will study the sacred war of the twin suns, Professor Quindar announced. This conflict is considered the greatest example of civilized warfare in galactic history. Jake settled back in his chair, ready to listen politely. He would not ask any questions. He would not make any suggestions. He would just learn about alien history the way they wanted to teach it. The holographic display activated, showing 2 star systems connected by a bridge of energy. The systems were beautiful, with golden suns and planets that sparkled like jewels. The Sacred War began in the year 1847, Professor Quindar said. The noble Keltherian Empire discovered that their sacred energy bridge was being used by the Novak Federation without permission. Jake watched as the display showed elegant spaceships from both sides. The Keltharian ships looked like flying cathedrals, covered in gold and precious stones. The Novak ships resembled giant flowers made of metal and crystal. Rather than demand immediate satisfaction, the professor continued, both sides agreed to conduct a proper war according to the ancient rules of honor. The display showed the two fleets meeting in space between the star systems. Instead of attacking immediately, they arranged themselves in perfect formations and began what looked like a dance. The war lasted 847 years, Professor Quindar said proudly. During this time, both sides demonstrated the highest levels of military artistry. Jake blinked. 847 years? That seemed like an incredibly long time for any war. The rules were very specific, the professor explained. Battles could only be fought on certain days of the week. No fighting was allowed during religious holidays, harvest seasons, or cultural festivals. Each battle had to be announced 3 days in advance, and both sides had to agree on the location. The holographic display showed scenes from the war. Spaceships engaged in elaborate combat patterns that looked more like ballet than fighting. Weapons fired in beautiful spirals and graceful arcs. When a ship was destroyed, it exploded in showers of colorful sparks. Single combat was preferred, Professor Quindar said. Champions from each side would duel in space while the fleets watched. The losing side would withdraw for exactly 1 month before challenging again. Jake watched a scene where 2 pilots and small fighters circled each other slowly, firing carefully aimed shots. The battle lasted for hours, with long pauses between attacks, so both pilots could demonstrate their skill. The war included many artistic elements, the professor continued. Battles were choreographed to create beautiful patterns in space. Pilots composed poetry about their enemies. Musicians on both sides wrote songs about famous duels. A student raised her hand. She was one of the plant-like aliens, with leaves that changed color when she was excited. "Professor," she said, "why did the war last so long? Couldn't they have settled their differences more quickly?" Professor Quindar's 4 arms spread wide in a gesture of pride. "That is exactly the point, dear student. The war lasted long because both sides wanted it to last long. They understood that the purpose of war is not merely to win, but to demonstrate honor, courage, and artistic skill." Jake felt his eyes start to twitch. He pressed his lips together and tried to think about something else. The longer the war continued, the professor said, the more opportunities both sides had to show their nobility. Quick wars are the mark of barbaric species who care only about victory. Jake's hands clenched into fists. He forced himself to relax them and tried to focus on Lyra's list of safe responses. The Sacred War showcased the pinnacle of galactic military honor, Professor Quindar continued. Both sides followed strict rules of engagement. They never attacked supply lines, never targeted civilian populations, and never used weapons that would cause permanent damage to the star systems. The display showed more scenes from the war. Supply ships moved freely between battles, carrying food and weapons to both sides. Civilian ships traveled through the war zone without being bothered. Some even stopped to watch the battles like they were entertainment. The war finally ended when both sides realized they had achieved perfect artistic balance, the professor said. Neither had won, but both had demonstrated their cultural superiority. They signed a peace treaty that created the most beautiful ceremony in galactic history. Jake's eye was twitching faster now. He could feel sweat on his forehead. The final battle lasted 3 full days, Professor Quindar said. Both fleets performed an elaborate dance of honor while their champions fought the ultimate duel. When it was over, both sides declared victory and agreed to share the energy bridge equally. Splash 9, Jake's roommate, raised his hand. "Professor, can you explain how they maintained their supply lines during such a long war?" "An excellent question," the professor said. Supply lines were never targeted because that would have been dishonorable. Both sides understood that war is about testing skill and courage, not about causing suffering. Jake's hands were shaking now. He kept thinking about 847 years. 847 years of war that could have been over in months. The supply ships traveled on fixed schedules, the professor explained. Both sides knew when and where they would arrive, but attacking them was forbidden by the rules of civilized warfare. Jake bit his tongue to keep from speaking. He could see dozens of ways the war could have been ended quickly. It was so obvious that it hurt. Some historians believe, the professor continued, that the Sacred War could have lasted even longer if both sides had tried harder to avoid victory. Imagine if it had continued for 1,000 years. What a magnificent achievement that would have been. That was too much. Jake stood up so quickly that his chair fell over. "This is insane," he said, his voice loud in the quiet classroom. "Jake?" Lyra warned, but he was already talking. 847 years? Jake said, his voice getting louder. 847 years for a war that could have been over in 6 months. The classroom went silent. Professor Quindar's 4 arms froze in the air. "You want to know how to end this war?" Jake continued, his voice calm but intense. "I'll tell you how to end this war." He walked to the front of the classroom, ignoring Lyra's frantic signals to sit down. The holographic display was still showing the 2 star systems with their beautiful fleets. "First," Jake said, pointing at the display, "you don't announce your battles 3 days in advance. That's just giving your enemy time to prepare. You attack when they don't expect it." Several students gasped. The plant-like students' leaves turned bright red. "Second," Jake continued, "you don't follow a schedule for supply ships. You attack the supply lines immediately. No food, no fuel, no weapons. The enemy surrenders in weeks." Splash 9 made a sound like a dying whale. Professor Quindar sat down heavily in his chair. "Third," Jake said, warming to his topic, "you don't fight fair duels in space. You use every advantage you have. Outnumber them, outgun them, outthink them. The goal is to win, not to look pretty doing it." The metal-enhanced student's eyes were blinking rapidly. Numbers and calculations were scrolling across his visual display. "Fourth," Jake said, "you don't share the energy bridge equally. Winner takes all. That's what wars are for. If you don't want to lose something, don't start a war over it." He pointed at the display, showing the civilian ships watching battles. "And you definitely don't let enemy civilians just fly around your war zone like it's a show. You control the space, you control the resources, you control the information." Jake turned to face the class. Every alien student was staring at him with expressions of horror and fascination. "You want to know how long this war should have lasted?" Jake asked. 6 months, maybe less. "First, you blockade the energy bridge so no one can use it. Then you hit their supply depots in both star systems. Then you attack their main fleet while they're trying to figure out what happened to their supplies." He walked over to the display controls and started manipulating the hologram. The beautiful, artistic battle formations disappeared, replaced by simple tactical diagrams. "Look," Jake said, pointing at his diagrams. "The Keltharian Empire has 3 main supply stations. Take them out in coordinated strikes. The Novak Federation's fleet is spread out in a defensive pattern. Hit them. In groups, don't let them combine their forces." The metal-enhanced students' calculations were getting faster. Jake sat in a small white room with no windows. The walls were smooth and clean, and the only furniture was a table and 2 chairs. He had been there for 3 hours, waiting for someone to tell him what was happening. The red alarm lights had finally stopped flashing. but he could still hear security teams moving through the station corridors. The door opened and 3 aliens entered. Jake recognized Headmaster Velkoth, but the other 2 were new. One was a tall alien with silver skin and 6 arms. The other looked like a walking tree with glowing fruit hanging from its branches. Jake Morrison, Velkoth said, his crystal body reflecting the room's bright lights. This is Security Chief Zaravex and Counselor Rootsinger from the Galactic Education Council. Jake stood up nervously. Am I in trouble? That depends, Security Chief Zaravex said. Her voice was sharp and cold. Do you understand what you did in that classroom? I just answered a question about military history, Jake said. Rootsinger's fruit glowed brighter. You provided detailed tactical analysis that could be used to win actual wars. 3 different galactic governments have requested copies of your lecture. Jake sat back down, feeling confused. It wasn't a lecture. I was just explaining how the war could have ended faster. That's the problem, Velkoth said. Your explanations are too. Good. Security Chief Zaravex activated a holographic display. It showed Jake's diagrams from the classroom, but now they were covered with official military analysis symbols. Our computer systems ran your tactical suggestions through war simulation programs, she said. Every single one of your ideas would work. Not only would they work better than anything in our military databases. Jake stared at the display. That can't be right. I just made those up on the spot. Exactly, Rootsinger said. You created military strategies in minutes that our best generals take months to develop, and you did it without even trying. The display changed to show files from different alien governments. Jake could see his own name on documents marked classified and potential threat. The Centauri Republic wants to hire you as a military consultant, Security Chief Zaravex said. The Andromedian Consortium has offered to pay for your education if you'll work for them after graduation. The Vegan Alliance has asked us to expel you immediately. Why would they want to expel me? Jake asked. Because you scare them, Velkoth said simply. Rootsinger's branches rustled like leaves in the wind. Jake, we need you to understand something about galactic history. Most of our species are not like humans. The holographic display changed to show different alien worlds. Jake saw peaceful planets covered in crystal cities, underwater civilizations, and forests that stretched across entire continents. The Zephyrians evolved on a planet rich in crystal energy, Rootsinger explained. We never needed to fight over resources. Our wars were mainly ceremonial competitions. The display showed Zephyrian battles that looked like elaborate light shows. Armies of crystal beings moved in perfect formations, creating beautiful patterns instead of trying to kill each other. The Aquarians come from ocean worlds where territory means nothing, Rootsinger continued. Their conflicts were more like games than wars. Jake watched Aquarian naval battles where ships tried to splash each other instead of sinking each other. The goal seemed to be getting the other side wet, not destroying them. The sectoids evolved as a hive mind, Rootsinger said. They never had civil wars because they all think the same thoughts. What about the other species? Jake asked. Most galactic civilizations spent hundreds of thousands of years learning to make warfare less deadly, Security Chief Zaravex said. They developed honor codes, rules of engagement, and artistic traditions specifically to limit the damage wars could cause. The display showed examples from dozens of different species. Every one of them had turned warfare into some kind of art form or ritualized competition. But humans are different, Velkoth said. The display changed to show Earth's history. Jake saw images that made him feel uncomfortable. Ancient human battles where armies fought with stone weapons, trying to completely destroy their enemies. Medieval sieges where soldiers starved entire cities into surrender. Modern wars where millions of people died. Humans evolved on a planet that was actively trying to kill them, Rootsinger said. Ice ages, volcanic eruptions, asteroid impacts, superviruses, predator species, resource shortages. Your survival depended on being able to eliminate threats quickly and completely. Jake watched scenes of early humans hunting massive predators, surviving natural disasters, and fighting each other over water and food. Other species had time to develop elaborate rules for fighting, Security Chief Zaravek said. Humans had to develop tactics that worked or die. The display showed the progression of human military technology. Stone weapons became metal weapons. Metal weapons became guns. Guns became missiles. Missiles became nuclear weapons. Most alien species took millions of years to develop basic military technology, Rootsinger said. Humans went from throwing rocks to splitting atoms in less than 10,000 years. And you didn't stop there, Velkov added. The display showed modern human space forces. Jake saw sleek warships that looked nothing like the decorative alien vessels he had seen before. These ships were built for function, not beauty. They looked fast, dangerous, and efficient. When humans first made contact with galactic civilization, 50 years ago, Security Chief Zaravek said, several species wanted to destroy Earth immediately. Jake felt cold. They wanted to kill us all? They were afraid of what humans might do if you ever decided to expand beyond your solar system. Rootsinger said, your military technology was already more advanced than most galactic powers, and you had only been spacefaring for a few decades. The display showed classified documents from the early contact period. Jake could see meeting transcripts where alien leaders debated whether humanity was too dangerous to allow into galactic society. The Rigelian Empire wanted to launch a preemptive strike, Velkov said. The Canopus Federation suggested quarantining your entire solar system. The Sirius Collective proposed monitoring Earth until your species went extinct naturally. What stopped them? Jake asked. Humans did. Security Chief Zaravek said. The display showed the first human diplomatic mission to meet with galactic leaders. Jake saw ordinary-looking people in simple uniforms, sitting across from aliens who looked like living weapons. Instead of demanding territory or resources, Rootsinger said, the human delegates immediately offered to share all their technology with the galactic community. They proposed joint research projects, cultural exchanges, and peaceful cooperation. Jake watched scenes of humans teaching aliens about Earth medicine, agriculture, and engineering. At the same time, humans were learning about alien art, philosophy, and science. No species in galactic history had ever done that before, Velkov said. Usually, when a new civilization joins the community, they try to gain as much advantage as possible. Humans did the opposite, but the fear never went away. Security Chief Zaravek said. The display showed more recent events. Human students. At alien schools, human scientists working with alien researchers, human artists collaborating with alien musicians. Every time a human demonstrates your natural tactical abilities, Rootsinger said, it reminds everyone how dangerous your species could be if you ever changed your minds about cooperation. Jake thought about his outburst in the classroom. So when I explained how to win that war quickly, I was basically threatening everyone. Not threatening, Velkov said, but demonstrating. You showed them that humans can look at any military situation and immediately see how to win it efficiently. The display showed tactical analyses of famous galactic battles. Each one included a section labeled Human Strategic Assessment that was marked classified. Every major galactic power now employs human military advisors, Security Chief Zaravek said, but they also maintain detailed defense plans specifically designed to counter human tactics. They're preparing to fight us? Jake asked. They're preparing to fight you if they ever have to, Rootsinger said. The hope is that they never will. Jake stared at the classified files floating in the holographic display. Is that why human students keep getting expelled? Because we remind everyone that we're dangerous? Partly, Velkoth said. But also because human students keep accidentally improving alien military capabilities. The display showed files on the previous human students Jake had learned about. Ben Carter's water supply tactics had been adopted by 3 different armies. Lisa Stone's leadership targeting strategies were now part of standard galactic peacekeeping doctrine. Tony Kim's battle plans were still classified as weapons of mass destruction. Every human student who gets expelled leaves behind tactical innovations that change how wars are fought, Security Chief Zaravek said. You're not just students. You're walking military research and development programs. So what happens to me now? Jake asked. The 3 aliens looked at each other. Velkoth's crystal body dimmed slightly. That depends, Rootsinger said, on whether you can learn to think like them instead of thinking like a human. And if I can't, then you'll be the 48th human student to be expelled from a galactic academy, Security Chief Zaravek said. Jake looked around the small white room. 2 weeks later, Jake stood in the largest auditorium on the station. The room was packed with hundreds of alien students, professors, and officials from across the galaxy. Representatives from 12 different species sat in the front rows. Their various eyes, sensors, and attention organs focused on him. Jake felt nervous, but not the same kind of nervous he had felt in the White Room. This was the good kind of nervous, the kind that meant he was about to do something important. Lyra Banks sat in the front row, giving him an encouraging smile. Next to her, Headmaster Velkoth's crystal body reflected the stage lights. My name is Jake Morrison, he began, his voice carried throughout the room by alien translation technology. I'm the human student who caused all the trouble 2 weeks ago. A few nervous chuckles came from the audience. Jake could see Splash 9 in the crowd, along with several of his other classmates. They looked curious, but cautious. I want to start by apologizing, Jake said. I scared a lot of people, and that wasn't fair. I didn't understand why my ideas were so frightening. He paused, looking out at the sea of alien faces. Some were familiar species, others were completely new to him. All of them were listening carefully. But I also want to explain something, Jake continued. I want to help you understand why humans think the way we do about war and conflict. The holographic display behind him activated, showing images of early Earth. The planet looked wild and dangerous, with active volcanoes, massive storms, and hostile environments. This is where humans come from, Jake said. For millions of years, everything on our planet was trying to kill us. Ice ages that lasted thousands of years. Volcanoes that blocked out the sun. Diseases that wiped out entire populations. The display showed scenes of early humans struggling to survive. They were fighting massive predators, fleeing from natural disasters, and competing with each other for limited resources. We didn't develop tactical thinking because we wanted to hurt people, Jake said. We developed it because we had to survive. An alien in the audience raised a tentacle. Jake recognized the species as one of the peaceful ocean dwellers. But why did you keep developing weapons after the threats were gone? The alien asked. Jake nodded. It was a good question. Because the threats never really went away. Humans learned that the best way to protect your family, your tribe, your country, was to be ready for anything. The display changed to show human history. But instead of focusing on the wars and conflicts, Jake showed the other side. Humans building walls to protect their cities. Humans developing medicine to fight diseases. Humans creating technology to survive harsh environments. Every military advancement humans made was also used for protection and survival, Jake said. The same technology that made better weapons also made better tools, better medicine, better ways to grow food. He looked directly at Professor Quindar, who was sitting in the third row. The sectoid still looked nervous, but he was paying attention. "When I suggested faster ways to end that war in your class," Jake said, "I wasn't trying to be disrespectful to your culture. I was thinking about all the people who died during those 800 years. In my mind, ending the war quickly would have saved millions of lives." The room was completely quiet now. Jake could see aliens leaning forward in their seats. "That's how humans think about conflict," he continued. "The faster you can end it, the fewer people suffer. The more efficient your solution, the more lives you save." A crystal-skinned alien from the Rigel system stood up. "But what about honor? What about the beauty of civilized warfare?" Jake smiled. "I've been learning about that from my classmates and professors, and I think I understand now. Your way of fighting is about more than just winning. It's about expressing your culture, showing respect for your enemies, and demonstrating the best qualities of your species." The display showed scenes from the sacred war of the Twin Suns, but this time Jake highlighted different aspects. The artistic formations of the fleets, the poetry written by warriors, the cultural exchanges that happened during truces. "I can see the value in that," Jake said. "Your wars created art, music, literature, and philosophy. They brought different species together and helped them understand each other better." He paused and looked around the room. "But I also think there's value in the human approach. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is end a conflict quickly." The display showed a new scenario, one that Jake had created with help from the academies. Computers. It was a theoretical war between two alien species, but this time it included both approaches. "What if we combined both ways of thinking?" Jake asked. "What if we used efficient tactics to end wars quickly when lives are at stake, but also preserve the cultural and artistic elements that make your conflicts meaningful?" The display showed his hybrid approach: quick, decisive military actions to establish clear victory, followed by elaborate ceremonies to honor both sides and preserve cultural traditions. "The war ends in months instead of centuries," Jake explained, "but the peace negotiations take years and include all the artistic and cultural elements that your species value." Circuit Prime, the metal-enhanced student, raised his mechanical hand. "Probability calculations show this approach would reduce casualties by 87%, while preserving 94% of cultural significance." Murmurs of interest rippled through the audience. Jake could see aliens discussing the idea with their neighbors. "There's something else I want to share," Jake said. The display changed to show files from human military history, but not the wars. Instead, it showed humanitarian missions, disaster relief efforts, and peacekeeping operations. "Humans use our tactical abilities for more than just fighting," he said. "We use them to deliver food to starving populations, to evacuate people from natural disasters, to stop conflicts before they start." The display showed human ships bringing supplies to alien colonies hit by asteroid impacts, human medics working alongside alien doctors to fight disease outbreaks, human engineers helping to rebuild worlds damaged by war. The same strategic thinking that makes us good at warfare also makes us good at solving problems and helping people. Jake said. Root Singer from the Galactic Education Council stood up, his fruit glowing softly. "Are you proposing that humans serve as military advisors to help shorten conflicts?" "Not exactly," Jake said. "I'm proposing that we work together. Humans can provide tactical expertise to end conflicts quickly, while aliens can provide wisdom about how to make peace meaningful and lasting." He gestured to his classmates in the audience. "I've learned so much from studying here. Splash 9 taught me about patience and the importance of understanding all sides of a conflict. Circuit Prime showed me how to calculate the true costs of different approaches. Professor Quindar helped me appreciate the cultural significance of military traditions. Professor Quindar's large black eyes widened in surprise. Jake smiled. At him, I think humans and aliens can learn from each other, Jake continued. You can teach us about honor, patience, and the value of beautiful solutions. We can teach you about efficiency, rapid problem-solving, and protective thinking. Security Chief Zarevex stood up from her seat. What you're suggesting would require major changes to galactic military doctrine. It would also require major changes to human thinking, Jake admitted. We would have to learn to value process and tradition, not just results. The auditorium erupted in discussion. Aliens were talking excitedly to each other in dozens of different languages. Jake could see some nodding in agreement, while others looked skeptical. Headmaster Velkoff stood up, and the room gradually became quiet. Jake Morrison, the crystal being said, you have given us much to think about. The Galactic Education Council will need time to consider your proposals. I understand, Jake said. However, Velkoff continued, I can announce one decision immediately. You will not be expelled from this academy. The room burst into applause. Jake felt relief wash over him. He had done it. He was the first human student who wouldn't be sent home in failure. Furthermore, Velkoff said, raising his arms for quiet, we will be implementing a new program. Human students will be paired with alien study partners for all history classes. In return, human students will offer optional seminars on what we're calling practical problem-solving techniques. More applause filled the room. Jake could see Lyra Banks wiping tears from her eyes. The first seminar will be taught by Jake Morrison next week, Velkoff announced. The topic will be efficient conflict resolution, when speed saves lives. After the applause died down, aliens began approaching the stage. Some wanted to ask questions about human tactical thinking. Others wanted to discuss the philosophical implications of combining different approaches to conflict. Splash 9 was one of the first to reach him. I would like to attend your seminar, his roommate said. I want to understand how to help people more efficiently. Professor Quindar approached more cautiously. Jake, he said, I owe you an apology. I was so focused on preserving tradition that I forgot the most important tradition of all, learning from others. There's nothing to apologize for, Jake said. You helped me understand that there's more to conflict than just winning.